Welcome to the webinar. The topic for today is managing everyday data risk in today's digital workplaces. My name is Rastina from EasiShare and I'll be the moderator for today. Now, we often overlook data risk in our digital workplace. Recent changes to work arrangements and tightening data protection regulations created uncertainties and threatened business operations. And overlooking them means these risks are often left unattended to until a data breach occurs or a data leak occurs. So this raises the pressing question, is file security a part of your risk management program? So without further ado, I would like to introduce to you our speaker for today, Teck Wei. He is the product manager from EasiShare and has 10 years of experience as an IT professional, handling projects of various sizes and complexities from MNCs to SMEs. His business and technology-trained background uniquely positions him to leverage knowledge from domains to deliver additional value to customers. Okay, so before we start the webinar, I would like to highlight to everyone that if any of you have any questions during this webinar, please feel free to use the Q&A function located at the bottom of the Zoom panel as shown in the screen. Okay, now I'll pass the stage over to Teck Wei. Over to you.
Thanks, Rastina. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Thanks for coming early. There's a lot of you that came in early. So for today, it's going to be a bit more casual. And EasiShare ourselves will be the one hosting this webinar. So as per Rostina's introduction, right, I myself actually started my career in the risk management space, in the IT risk side. So it's very interesting to have come out with today's topic. And just to share a bit of like why we came out with this topic is that a lot of our customers, partners in the ecosystem frequently ask us about like what we do in EasiShare seems to be a very small piece of thing. How do we fit into the entire landscape of file security risk management, right? In fact, in a lot of our customers, risk management is a very huge thing. Often, it's something where it goes beyond just IT and file security. So going along with this line, we came up with today's topic and zoom in specifically to like on the file side, what do we think about it and how we help our customers apply this. So before I start, right, I just want to define a little bit about like what do we mean by digital workplace in our title here, right? We see it as that there are a lot of digital workers now. We are using a lot of tools, as well as that interchangeably with a lot of business application systems and stuff. And files have really become a way of connecting, communicating, and collaborating with a lot of digital workers. So this is the space whereby we share a lot of files naturally, every day, whether by email, by certain productivity tools, or through ERP systems. There are a lot of files, be it invoices, proposals, tender documents, other clarifications as well. So there's a lot of all this actually going around in our digital workplace that we often no longer observe them anymore. It's just something that we take for granted. And that goes to the next slide where I'm going to share about like why do we often overlook this data risk at digital workplace. Definitely in a lot of organizations, right, there's a lot of risk and compliance being put inside. But what I observed, especially in my early years towards as a cyber risk professional, and including now sometimes when I hear of cases of data breaches, right, I noticed that it's because we often treat cyber risk and compliance as a tick of paper exercise. So I recall a story, right? One of the story I had in my earlier days was that as an auditor, one of my auditee, that means the audit client, shared this conversation that he had with his daughter. So a little bit unfortunate due to the audit, this client has to stay a little bit longer hours, and the daughter asked, like, the daddy, why you so busy? Then the audit customer was quite cute in answering the daughter's question. So they told the daughter like, okay, this audit is like a test, like the daughter going for PSLE like that. So like daddy must pass this, if not we'll get into trouble. So this to me was a bit amusing, other than the fact that it's quite an interesting way of putting it. The other part is that audit and compliance often is seen as though like it's like a test. It's like a paper exercise, right? So even for today's education, we know that paper qualifications and tests sometimes shouldn't mean everything. And at the same time, when we look at cyber risk and compliance as a paper exercise, we then often forgot the real value behind it, which is to have a robust analysis over the risk that's involved when we do things, and how should we manage and mitigate these risks. And otherwise, if you don't do this, then we will just have a white elephant document that we every year just doing it for the sake of doing it. Which then begs the question, right? I have actually since even before I joined InspireTech, which is that are we all guilty of such practices of treating risk, compliance, governance as just paper exercises, doing for the sake of doing? And even if we are, right, actually we need not be. So risk can be very simple, right? And why should we care about data risk today? So this is quite simple. The value of data has increased. So in the past, first we have lesser digital data. Now we have more data, and this data can be used for a lot of things. For example, our personal data can now easily do online banking transactions. So think about it, like 15, 20 years back, right? There is no such thing. We do banking through ATMs and stuff. So such that it's more scary to lose the ATM card in those days. Like if you lose your address or if you lose your IC number, typically not much of a problem. But today, the data sense is a bit different. If you lose your IC, your address, or other personal information together, all these add together can do real harm to individuals as well as businesses, and on a larger scale, from a national level, also national security. So there's a lot of like information at a national level that is also very important. In the past, these were probably also not digitized, but now it's digitized. And the way that threat actors are using it has also evolved. So this has really been one of the trends that we observe. Then secondly, right, with respect to this area is also that the rate and the exchanges of this data, right, has increased a lot. So just imagine, right, I think I want to take us back a little bit into history. About 20 years ago, if some of you all have been working or some of us might be students, how many emails do we deal with? How many Word documents do we deal with? In fact, in those days, it's exciting when we receive an email. Okay, like that's the coolest thing that you receive on earth, right? But today, we have the other problem whereby these rates of data exchanges, whether from social media for your personal work or for business side, when you do your work emails and stuff, all these are very overwhelming. And with this, right, this is the reason why as humans, right, we start to actually lose control of what are the files and data that are moving on. So imagine in the past, when it's all paper and files, you literally watch the paper slowly moving through the organization. So if something bad happens, it's usually also slow. But today, files are so rapidly moving all around in the organization, moving organization more and more faster, right? At the same time, when something goes wrong, it can go wrong very rapidly, and the impact is also very huge. So the idea of risk, right, is two parts: probability and impact. So with the trends that we have, right, the rate being increased, the probability of something goes wrong has somewhat also increased. And at the same time, right, the value of the data now is so important that it can affect so many parts of our life. That also creates a larger impact. Then we see all the regulations coming in as well. And ultimately, I think for us as individuals or managing organizations, as well as for some of the others who are in charge of data protection, right, the fact that the higher risk of data breach and losses, right, is very important today. And we often overlook it again is because there are certain items put in place, but like I mentioned just now, the compliance and the risk part is being treated more like a paper exercise. So unfortunately, there are good ideas and good frameworks and good methodologies out there, but sadly speaking, the whole risk management, especially for data and file security today, right, still remains very paper-centric. And what I wish to see is that we go deeper, really have some exercise to understand this risk so that we can apply it on ourselves. And for some of us here who might be technology service providers, or to also share with customers like how to analyze these processes and fix this, whether by virtue of putting in technology, which is usually the easiest one, or by processes or by education of the people, right? So this is the gist of the objective of the webinar today. And leading that, right, earlier on I mentioned about impact. So this impact of these vulnerabilities with the background of what I've shared, right, really increase some of these possibilities and increase the impact of the vulnerabilities. So without applying good risk management towards file exchanges and overlooking them, the vulnerabilities and data breaches are enabled to spiral out of control. So this really have serious consequences. Now, what do I mean by serious consequences, right? First, there is the idea of a damage to data. For example, recently there's the news about a company using Google Drive. A resigned employee was not happy, deleted files away. They struggled to recover. They managed to recover partially, but there were still some that were totally lost. So there is that whole disruption to the operations due to the loss of the data. So that is one scenario. Second scenario, it will also cause degradation of customers and investors' confidence. So this happens when a data breach happens, and if it's get big enough, you have to report it into the PDPC and it goes into the evaluation of the PDPC. So fines and penalties come in. But beyond just the fines and penalties, right, I think what happened is that then PDPC will publish this case onto the commission's decisions. So this is something that even at InspireTech, right, we follow quite closely. The reason is because we are also DPTM certified, so Data Protection Trust Mark certified. We want to ensure that whatever that happened to other organizations, we learn from the mistakes, we understand the nature of the situation, and then we make sure that we handle the risk ourselves. And at the same time, also because of the space that we are in, as when we implement EasiShare as a product, we can also then help customers and partners to know some of these stories and lessons that's learned from this, and so as to prevent such things from happening. So such things, if happen, you get published onto the PDPC. So in Singapore, that's the Personal Data Protection Council, and that will be a damage to reputation as well. On to the third point, some of us might be in regulated industries, for example, especially in banking, and failure to meet certain compliance, right, could mean penalties as well, or could mean additional regulations being passed on to you as a judgment. So that will have an impact as well. And linking at the same time, right, for banking especially, it can even end up with a suspension of license, right? So if there is a suspension of license, then the financial organization cannot operate. So these do have very serious consequences that overall it leads on to something that we all care about, will be that all these can potentially lead to overall financial losses. So these issues here are some of the things that we have to put in a frame of mind to understand. And when we understand this thing, we will appreciate the idea of risk management, especially when we deal with file exchanges in today's digital workplace. So would you want this to happen to you? So of course the answer is no. So we don't want financial losses. We are all here to add value, bring value, and bring profits to organization as well. So we definitely don't want those things to happen. And that is the reason why risk management should be a part of every organization, which a lot have adopted. And going down further, what we are trying to say today is that file exchanges and file security should also be under the radar of all the risk management exercise that's being done in the organization. So now I've spoken about like what risk management many times. So what exactly is risk management, right? Quick definition will be that it's the process of identifying, assessing, and controlling threats to an organization's capital and earnings. So it started, risk management really started to become more and more popular, right? Some of y'all might have known is after the September 11 incident. So some of the cases that y'all might remember will be like Enron, WorldCom. So in those days, in the 90s, when economy was booming and everything, people don't really care. Even the transport, when we talk about flying, in the past, you don't really have to scan your bags, go through all the body checks. All this really happened in September 11, which happened in 2001. So it's about 21 years ago already. And yeah, the anniversary in fact is coming out like 5 days later. So what is important about this is that not only it has brought about a lot of collapse and a lot of stories and a lot of sad stories, right? It brought about risk management. So Sarbanes-Oxley Act from the US, they started expecting that directors do have to be responsible for risk management. Organizations shouldn't be running in a way where it's profit at all costs, no risk management, the CEO is a cowboy, and all sorts of things is happening. And then from a transport side, I spoke about airline, right? It's about all the controls, identifying where are the risks, assessing, and then putting in the relevant controls. So this concept, it went popular and it's even relevant in recent times when we address the COVID issues that for some of us who is in Singapore, we are fortunate enough that the airports and some of the measures that is taken in Singapore has worked pretty well for Singapore. And actually, this is all part of a risk management idea that has been applied to allow countries, organizations, individuals to really deal with it. So risk management is something very common sense actually. It's just that when things get bigger in an organization or in a national level, we more formalize it. But otherwise, it's a very common sense exercise, which in the later part of the webinar, I will share a bit more. But the storytelling of the September 11 and what it goes through, right, is really to give you that context of like how this has shifted. And very relevant today is like after the pandemic, just as we thought it's over, now we have more challenges, whether is it geopolitics issue or whether is it inflationary risk. These are some patterns that some observers have noticed that is very similar to the lead up towards the September 11 era, where there were a series of also inflationary pressures, strong economic growth, low unemployment, and after that, when certain things starts to collapse due to weak risk management and control measures, then the whole economy started collapsing. And today, we do see some trends. I do see some economists or some professionals sharing concerns over some of the trends that they see, especially in the technology sector that we are in. But of course, there are also people who say that now, given the lessons that we learned, if we learn the lessons that we learned from history well, we will be able to overcome this. And so this concept is something that I feel strongly that we really must embrace as a whole. Now, one example of how we see this in terms of file security, right, will be this there'll be a little bit of cute animation here. Yeah, identifying. How do we identify? So one example of putting file security as a priority will be that we have to identify that, oh, actually files are the building blocks to today's organizations, and they're happening in all our operations and exchanges. So let me just pause a little bit here, right? And then just before I move on, right, really think about like what was the last file that you interacted with? What was the purpose of the file? Where do you receive it from? Did you open it in a secure space? Could there be implications if the file is being leaked? And what are the tools? Where did you open it from? Were there any people around you that could have seen the document and stuff? So these questions really come fundamentally towards the next stage, right? In terms of assessing this. So now you already know this file that you're interacting with. Now you have to assess that some of the questions that I asked, would there be somebody seeing it? And if somebody saw it, what is the implication? The tools that you use, if there is a man in the middle attack, what is the implication? And in terms of storing the files, what if you cannot find the file anymore? So perhaps you put it into on your laptop, or nowadays it could be on your mobile phone, and then you lose your phone and you didn't use any of the tools to sync the document to a backup storage or a cloud or something like iCloud for iPhone, right? Then what is the implication? And once you have this ideology and thoughts in mind, right, which is not complicated. So you think about it, just within this 10 minutes, right, I briefly described to you how a risk analysis, how a risk analytics would have worked, and how would a risk professional be thinking about such questions. So of course, the other work will be then to document it down if you work in an organization that requires the documentation. But otherwise, the risk management exercise is as simple as what I've just described. Yeah. Finally, after you think through all these things and you know where are the risks, where are the things that you can accept, then you decide whether you want to put in controls or not. So for example, if you think through the file, okay, actually the file is just publicly, will be distributed publicly as publicly available information. It's not too sensitive. Okay, then yeah, you look at it on your mobile phone, on the MRT train, or on the bus. It's okay. So that is a low risk item. But what if it's a more secret plan? So for example, during the pandemic, some has actually escalated, right? Some of the pandemic related news that could have impact on society. So you see some members working in, I believe it was MOE or basically government agencies, that they unintentionally, they do have good intentions just to share with their family. But the news then shared to other people and it became an issue and they get charged under OSA. So similarly, recently there was also another embargo where I can't remember which news outlet. The news outlet accidentally pre-released something. So some of us might know news are usually given to news outlet early, but there's a timing that the government will stimulate when it should be released. So if you're dealing with these files and documents, right, then should one be more careful and put in whether tools, processes, or people should be educated on how to deal with this data risk and prevent and mitigate this. So this really completes that whole process of simple identification, assessment, and then putting in some mechanisms to control it. Yeah. And diving a bit deeper will be then, before I show you more process-centric items, will be really to introduce you this question that most risk professionals will always think of, would be that, what could go wrong? WCGW, right? Some of you might be familiar. So what could go wrong at every step? And this is where sometimes we have some, in Chinese, we call 职业病. So when we are in a profession, then we have these nightmares. So some of the risk professionals, if we have some in the audience, probably can empathize this very well. You go home and sleep, and then suddenly you think like, oh, this thing something wrong, that thing something wrong. So even for me, I also start to have a little bit of this issue. Just to share with you another personal story. So yesterday, in our office, there was actually some peach fruit that was given to us by a vendor of us. So more for the season. So we took the peach fruit, and then I was supposed to take some home, but I left it on the table. So as you know, peach, right, it will attract ants and it goes back quite quickly. So as I went back home, then I thought I would just leave it and tell my colleagues to clean it later. But as I think about the risk again, right, I think about, oh, got ants. Then what if like later it becomes dirty, and then like tomorrow it's the fruit becomes bad and then we don't eat it. So I kept thinking about it. Then decided to, okay, head back to office again to go and take it. So not promoting this kind of behavior, but I just want to use this example to say that if we have a risk mindset in us, we should be applying this to our workplace as well and think through like what could go wrong. And with that, I really will be moving next to two scenarios. So next up in the next part of this webinar, right, I'll be sharing two scenarios, and each scenario I'll be sharing some what could go wrong. What could go wrong means risk in what we see, and how EasiShare is actually applied to sometimes help our customers to address these and put in something in part of their processes. Definitely, EasiShare alone is not the only answer. There are some other people and process elements to it as well. But for today, we will focus on a simple example of the two scenarios. Okay, and first up is the first scenario. So the two scenarios are a bit similar, so you have to follow me very closely. In the first scenario is when you receive a file from an external party. So I have four parts here, right? An external sending an inbound file to an internal recipient, and then going into your internal repository where all your crown jewels are. So think about it, it could be your patent for some organizations, it could be blueprints and stuff. So all this could come, this flow. Okay. So it starts off with processes first. So I'm trying to apply this methodology. You put up the processes, there are different steps here. Okay. And then what you do is that you start to assess. You assess whether there are risks and vulnerabilities that will exist in each of these steps. So first, right, when you receive file from an external sender, if you are getting the file through email or a USB, could it be that the email actually came from an unverified source that could have been packaged as though you know the sender, but in actual, it could have come from an unverified sender because of the way email technology is, right? Or it could be through a USB that someone just passed to you, right? Or maybe snail mail to you. Supposed to be rare now, but I do hear of such stories where certain maybe either government agencies or staff, they still mail CD. Yes, very not rare now, but I do hear of such stories. And if you are still using it, then you might want to reconsider how do you actually verify the CD, whether is it CD or USB that you are receiving, especially from snail mail, or if somebody passed it to a receptionist and the receptionist passed it to you and it went through multiple hands, how do you know that the file or this USB comes from a verified source? So this is really that questioning line that we have, which reminds me, I guess that's why a lot of people hate auditors, hate compliance, hate risk, because it's always asking the hard questions and it always seems to be making non-issues until got issues, like keep asking a lot of questions. Every day is question. Yeah. But I hope that after this webinar, we can all appreciate why these questions exist and why this risk management function is in place, especially after the whole lessons of the September 11 times, that era. And let us not forget those lessons and really embrace it and improve ourselves as individuals, businesses, society, and as a country, right? And second stage, even if you can verify the sender, you know who did this file come from, right? What if inside there somehow there is a virus infected file, whether in your email attachment, whether in the USB somewhere along the way, initially there was no virus, along the way somebody managed to plant in some virus through some means or through internet links from a public source. So if you are using some public download links and stuff, some issues over there. Then after you receive it, right, if no one went to download it, then nothing might happen. Yes. Okay, then the next stage will be then somebody downloaded this file and then the PC get damaged. So now this PC get infected, right? So the story, when you hear all these ransomware stories, if you read online, right, it always starts very simple. Some simple, but then it starts to get bigger, right? So at first, the sender not verified, the virus in the email attachment, actually not really a problem. The problem starts coming when a user double click on it or the user download it or the user run it. Okay, then now that's where the problem starts. And even at this case, right, it's still not too bad. Why? Because it's only that particular user getting affected, right? So it's like, okay, it's not my laptop, I don't care, not my problem, right? But what if, because this user is connected to the corporate network, and then the file get into the file servers, so we use a lot of network file servers and stuff sometimes, and then it just spreads to other parts of the organization. Okay, see, now it gets bigger and bigger. So as part of the risk thinking, you think through this whole process, it might look something so simple that, oh, it's just receiving an email attachment, and then it's just receiving a USB file. But these risks are real, and it might be a bit funny. So a lot of you might have think that this idea of like email threats and stuff, right, it's not new. But why is it always happening again and again and again? So it's more of a mindset and a thinking process that aggravates this. And so much so that even till this day, whenever you have new joiners onboarding or some annual refresh of cybersecurity awareness training, the idea of email attachment always comes up. It's even so amazing that even till this day, right, we are still talking about the same thing. But then the thing is that through the same mechanism, the ransomware, the attacks are also keep happening. They just get a bit more sophisticated. So yeah, to me, sometimes when I see it's also quite interesting. And to me, I also bear in mind that I could be a potential victim. So you can be a CIO, you can be a IT director, you can be a technology expert. We all can be a victim when we let our guard down and not think through the risk. Yep. And now I go to the second scenario. So just now I said it's very similar, right? Because now this one is that you as an individual share a file out to an external party. So it's the opposite. So need to follow the process very closely. So in this case now is that you as a sender, right? You want to send a file to an external party. And this could be a very sensitive file that is only meant for the intended party. So it could be some proposals that's not meant to be public yet, and etc. Even more so when you're working in the government sector and the banking line. So even for manufacturing, it could be some of your proprietary data and items. And inside here, right, this is where first thing is that a staff can accidentally share sensitive files to wrong person. So this can happen in the email. And I believe this is actually quite common. We often send the email, hey, wrong Susan, or wrong Wendy. Thought sent to this Wendy, but there's another Wendy, and then you type the Wendy in, and then it went out. And then it just went out, right? Then if you send to someone that you can just tell him to delete the file and everything is safe, okay, then 90% of the time we are all safe. But if you send it through a person who somehow has a malicious intent, then that could be a problem. Sometimes this individual could be a normal vendor or customer that you have, but he or she could be under certain threats. And when being exposed to sensitive information that he or she can gain a profit from, that might happen. So from a risk management angle, when I learned, right, from a financial angle, there's also stories such as there's a trusted accountant for 10 years, never do anything wrong. But then for one occasion, just have to embezzle the money. Why? Because there was a certain financial distress due to financial problems. So again, these are things that for 10 years, no problem, doesn't mean no problem. Circumstances change and situation change, and risk kind of is all around us. So second part is that even if there was no accidental sharing, but what if exposed link or the tool that is being used to send this file, right, is being intercepted by malicious actors? So this could be our usual reminder: usage of unsecure Wi-Fi, usage of unencrypted USB drive, unprotected USB drive. What if this is stolen? What if this is exposed? And then third thing is that usually when you lose a file, like if you lose a thumb drive in Starbucks, most of the time it's not really a problem. Maybe the Starbucks staff just take it and then cannot identify the owner, throw it away. But if a malicious actor gain hands on it, and this is very sensitive file and ask for ransom, okay, then that is where the bad thing will start to happen. So this is really a whole thinking process about risk and thinking through and being aware. First thing again, right, is identifying and assessing. So being aware of all this. And now so where does EasiShare comes in then? So what we want to do is that as a solution, we hope to play a little part in terms of protecting and securing the valuable digital assets that organizations have, whether in your own organizations or some of our partners, to then share this idea and empower our customers to also protect and secure their valuable digital assets. So coming back to scenario 1 again, this one, just a refresher, this is the one where external person will send file to you. So incoming, we are talking about files coming in, viruses coming into your organization. So in this section, right, we identified a couple of red color areas just now. What we have now is that in terms of our feature, we have a feature called file request that we can initiate from our organization out, and it will be a secured link and can have a OTP or two-factor kind of verification. So this will be the first section. So for the features part, I'll do it quickly. Is that what we have here now is that an internal person will do the file request. So it's not unsolicited, it's well solicited. And then when it goes to the external party, there is a mechanism to verify. So first thing, not only the person must have access to the email account. Secondly, it could be through a mean of SMS, OTP, or through a Microsoft Google Authenticator, right? To then match it. Once it's matched only, right, we allow the file to be uploaded. So that is what we have as the first feature. Zooming into the next part, okay, we'll cover two risks together. What if a virus comes in through the mechanism, and how do we then, and what if a user download the virus into the PC? So in this aspect, right, this is where we have the idea of making sure that we have AV and CDR technology. So again, antivirus, very common concept, but sometimes things still happen. So for us, what we promote is also that with our partner solutions to resolve this issue of virus infected file actually going through being received by your organization. And then after that, subsequently, even if a user download, what are some of the things that can be done, right? So this one goes a bit beyond EasiShare, but as part of the EasiShare solution, we can integrate with such solution to provide the comprehensiveness of the approach to such issues. So first, with AV and CDR, we can actually scan and sanitize the file to prevent the entry of the virus into the organization. So that is what we can integrate. When just now earlier on, I have the part whereby the external person will upload files to the link. There can be a process where EasiShare then takes the file and put it through AV and CDR first before bringing it into your organization. And in the event that there's a virus being detected, then the AV and the CDR will do what they need to do. Subsequently, even if let's say somehow it bypasses all these things and the file is downloaded, right? So we also put it that at the endpoint, there should also be antivirus at that level. So we putting different antivirus, multiple antivirus at various stages. In Singapore terms, it's called a bit like kiasu, whereby we are a bit like we want to make sure that everything is okay. And finally, for the last part of this first scenario, right, it will be that how about the part where viruses then spread through file servers to other parts of organizations. So this is really the part where InspireTech we do a lot in, especially in the earlier years, as we apply our solution to a lot of government agencies because they do a SMB ban. And so the first point will be a ban on the SMB. So it's not exactly a total ban. File servers are still very useful technology in terms of the performance and what it can do. But sometimes if they are storing sensitive files, we do want to consider whether these file servers, right, how is it being accessed, who can access this, and whether how we want to secure this can be tighter as well. And on 3B will be then backup and recovery. So zooming in about the part on file servers, right? So file servers are largely the culprits of ransomware. But this is not because the technology itself is lousy, but it's just because file servers are making work convenient. It makes file transfers very, very convenient. So it remains a very popular technology. But at the same time, that if you have something like a ransomware that happens, right, it's also making it easy for this to then permeate through the entire network. So for some organizations might not protect all file servers. So there are just certain file servers whereby it's less critical, but there are certain file servers that are storing more important files. Then when interacting with these more important file servers, right, putting EasiShare as a layer on top of the file server between the user and the repository would help to reduce the chance that a virus gets triggered. So some technical aspects, right, is when you are exposing the SMB directly, it's always easy to do a remote call to execute a program. But if the access to the SMB is only restricted to EasiShare, and in EasiShare, we do not have any APIs to trigger the execution of a file, then that naturally lowers the risk already. Cannot be totally no risk. So all risk management practitioner will tell you that there's no such thing as zero risk. But what we all strive is to reduce it to the minimum. And for more sensitive and more critical items, we do our best to put in the necessary controls based on our resources and based on the considerations in the risk management process to then apply the solution. So next up onto the backup and recovery portion, that will be in the event that there are some files and data losses, right? Our endpoint backup and sync do help with certain recovery of the file. This in the event that a user laptop is gone and stuff. So this is a simple use case. Beyond what is on the PowerPoint, we also do what I call as end-to-end backup, whereby EasiShare will handle the backup from user laptops into a central repository. Then thereon, we work with good data management solution providers who have very good data management solutions to ensure that on the repository itself is also protected. So again, right, a very Singapore concept that we have here, very, very kiasu, right? We want to make sure we don't have one form of backup. We have at least two kind of backup here, one from the end user laptop to a central repository. And then further, we have to protect the central repository. And then after that, subsequently, some of my customers do have the idea of replication to DR sites and stuff, or like a remote backup. So backup itself sounds simple, but there's a lot of knowledge in it as well. And that's the reason why a lot of tools, solutions, and services towards how backup should be done is also available in the market. Moving on to the scenario 2 is that this is the one that we share files outside. So we just now the previous scenario is that we don't want the bad things to come inside. Now this scenario is that we don't want our precious things to be leaked outside or stolen away. So first part, staff accidentally share wrong file. If you do in the email, you know that it's usually quite hard to cancel it back. Even if you use the callback feature, right? Sometimes it doesn't necessarily be so successful. So what we have is in EasiShare, we have the idea of approval flow, whereby when a user wants to share a file, it can be configured in the system to require an additional approval. So this will then have another second pair of eyes. So in risk and security controls terms, right, this is sometimes you might hear the word 4-eye mechanism. Okay, so for me, I have spectacles, so I kind of naturally have 4 eyes, but that's not the meaning. The meaning of 4 eyes means there will be 2 person, the maker will have 2 eyes watching it, and then after that, the checker will have another 2 eyes, so total 4 eyes. So this maker-checker idea is also what we can achieve from EasiShare to help to reduce that risk and put in a certain kind of control if an organization wishes to do so. And next, right, what about exposed link or tool? So what we have is that for our links, there is the idea of, again, the verification that I've shared in the previous scenario. We have the similar kind of verification here, as well as the idea of link expiry. So whatever links that is left out there, if the enforcement of link expiry is there, at least you know that by the time it crosses a certain date, there won't be all these publicly exposed links. So in fact, some of these links might be so scary that in a certain period of time, you see some of the data leaks happen because in the AWS S3 storage or in the SharePoint Online or in the Dropbox or some of the configuration, they put the link to be publicly accessible. And then Google being such a good crawler, right? They crawl through the internet, and found these files, and these files is end up searchable on the internet. So the pros of technology, Google is such a good tool, but at the same time, that if you do something wrong, Google crawl it so quickly that it appears into the search result that all your sensitive things are leaked out. So these are stories that really just happen very frequently. And what we try to do here in terms of risk management is to address this as much as possible within each organization's strategy and resources available. Okay, coming back to the exposed link, it will be that we have the link expiry, so quite intuitive. And then we have the 2FA that was also shared earlier. So I'll just move a little bit faster here. Next. Okay, in terms of the last part, if a malicious actor actually download and there's a ransomware, then that will be also a problem. Sorry, this is not ransomware. If a malicious actor downloads a sensitive file and then threatens the organization to leak this data file, then there is a bit of a problem. And with that, right, we do have some mini DRM feature. So what do I call that is that we have a mode that you can share with you only, no downloads. So even if somehow the person get hold of it, they can't massively take the whole thing. Maybe they might take 1 or 2 screenshots or something like that, but they can't easily obtain the entire thing, right? And then there's also the idea of download limit attempts. So these are some of the mini features that we have to be applied to the thing. So this one I won't go into much detail. And in fact, we have actually come to the end of the webinar and some of the stories that I shared. So to close off, right, I think this webinar we designed it quite intentionally. So if you notice that it's less of a product sales angle, what we are really trying to focus is the idea of risk management, because we believe that organizations should really have a robust risk management plan in place, which most do have, but a lot we see do not cover enough in terms of the file security. And that is the reason why we see a lot of all these scandals happening. And what we want to promote here is to then put more emphasis on the here. And to solve this, while EasyShare can have some ability to solve this, as I have shared, I also want to just really be honest that EasyShare alone will not be the full solution. We have to go through a whole process. If you are a head of an organization or if you're a partner, right, do share this with your customers, enable them to think about these topics, enable them to then put in the right controls, right tools, right education and awareness to users, and thereby building a more secure workplace. So not just for efficiency and stuff, but really putting security embedded into all work processes in today's digital workplace. And yeah, with that, I'll pass it back to Rostina. Thank you.
Thank you, Takeaway, for your insightful sharing. Okay, so with that, I hope everyone managed to take away some useful information and learn about the importance of file security and its critical role in your risk management program. Yeah, so whether it's for our own self, for individual businesses, or our country. So as for myself, after hearing to Takeaway's sharing, right, I personally feel that I could appreciate the process of risk management even better right now, starting with, of course, being aware, and then followed by identifying and make assessments, and lastly, to implement necessary controls. So with that, we will proceed to our Q&A question. Okay, it looks like we have one question from our Q&A box over here, and it's coming from Khairul Ashra Rahman. So he asks, does scenario 1 also can be known as a Trojan Horse method? So I think he's referring to the one that you're explaining about receiving files from external parties. Are you able to
Yes,
assist
correct.
on that?
So yeah, in the older terms is more known as Trojan Horse. And yeah, Trojan Horse in the older terms is just that it's more where, based on what I can remember, because long time since this word has came out, is the really is the story of the Trojan Horse. So the quick story is that the Trojan Horse was given, I can't remember who fight with who, but there was some part of the war, and the losing team sent a Trojan Horse inside to the winning team city, and the winning team city thought they won, right? They're very happy, they're celebrating. But in the Trojan Horse, right, is a lot of all the enemy soldiers. So when they were all drunk and heavy, then the enemy soldiers came and attacked. So how does it link to our Trojan Horse method when it comes to viruses, right? These viruses, right, disguise themselves as something legitimate. So they could disguise themselves as Chrome. They could disguise themselves as a DLL of a legitimate program, whether is it Windows operating system or even EasyShare. Even EasyShare would have a risk that can be attacked via this mechanism, right? And so on a larger scale of things, yes, it's quite similar, but coming back to files, it's really it's not exactly known as Trojan Horse method, but the idea behind it of hiding a virus into a file, the conceptually is the same. In terms of the people who I speak with, I don't see a lot of people claiming it as a Trojan Horse method, but personally, I do think that it's a very similar idea. And nowadays, what I see is that because of the pervasiveness of convenience of cloud, right? Some of these viruses no longer infect the PC. What they do is that they now, so in the past, a lot of viruses, their intention is
I
to,
think you are being muted. Okay.
oh, as in, okay, yeah.
Okay, yeah, we can hear you now.
I didn't change though. So it been muted for a while, is it? Maybe it's the connection.
Yeah,
Okay.
probably just for a while.
So yeah, back to this is more nowadays, what the viruses in the past, all these viruses, right? All they want to do is to disrupt organizations, bring systems down. Nowadays, the scary part is that people who are doing this, they stop having the objective to bring systems down. They start to stay stealth. They can stay there for 3 years, 4 years. They're just waiting for a time to get sensitive information. They find that more valuable than disrupting the systems. I think another reason also because today we are so good at building resilient systems in terms of ensuring that there is the systems, the uptime, we are so good at that. And they realize that a lot of organizations, while that is good, when it comes to data, they might not be so mature and as strong. And now you see the attackers targeting more towards the data end rather than in the olden days whereby it's more about like bringing your website down. You know, remember those days about the focus was more on DDoS. I mean, now still have, but those are no longer the objective of the threat actors because the impact of those are reduced again with risk management. So in last time, those were huge risks, defacement, DDoS downtime. Then all the controls and all the tools come to fix it. Now that those are fixed, the attackers will then think of new ways, and then they realize that, hey, this data thing seems to be a good thing. So totally exploded the whole ransomware. Some of the stories that you hear the past few years, right? Yeah, totally just exploded. And the fact that the attacker sees it as an opportunity means that the risk is there. So risk in terms of the value and the probability of it happening, and all these things come into play. Yep.
Right. Thank you, Takeaway, for answering. Yeah, I hope Mr. Cairo, you get the answer that you're looking for. Okay. Just want to reiterate that if you do have any other questions, feel free to use the Q&A function located at the bottom of the screen. Okay. Meanwhile, we don't have any other questions, but Takeaway, I do have a question for you.
Yep.
Yeah. So as someone who has tons of documents in my PC, right, and of file storage platforms, especially when I deal with a lot of marketing materials, yeah, out of curiosity, what are the common critical information of files that your customers are protecting usually?
Okay. So I guess from InspireTech's perspective, in our marketing, there is less so. So because we are a smaller company, our marketing materials, the most sensitive ones is in terms of the timing to announce partner engagements and some of the details. So lesser that. But I probably want to extrapolate your case to a bigger organization. So for some marketing departments that they might have include PR, public relations item, you could be dealing with announcement of major deals. So for example, you could be, I just select maybe Keppel Corp, right? There is a important closure of a deal. All these deals goes into billions of dollars and cross national interest. So sometimes these are oil and gas related. There are given oil and gas resources today, if you are dealing with, even if you are in the marketing department announcing some of the data and news surrounding oil and gas, right, then potentially that could be of a higher risk than as compared to like InspireTech, for example. And that will be, maybe I quickly also add on another example that came to my mind. Because some of our government agencies, customers, they're actually dealing with announcements of public relations in terms of like land use and stuff. So when it comes to anything related to land, property, even let's say MRT lines and stuff, right? This can be very sensitive and can have a huge impact on markets. And then due to the impact and the value of this data, then the risk assessment and the risk management will come in differently as compared to InspireTech, for example.
Right. Thank you for answering that, Degree. Now I do have a clearer view of what are the riskier files. Okay, so just want to know, like, what other common measures you encounter to help prevent or mitigate file risks?
Yeah, the one part that I briefly spoke about that I didn't put in more is just now earlier on I shared a bit about the file links being exposed. So the one that being crawled by Google one, where the links accidentally put wrong and crawled by Google. So what happened is that with all this digital, right, we have found it so convenient to share files. We just click share. We just click share. So one quick question is that how many of us, right, actually know if let's say we are using a file sharing solution, how many of these publicly available links did we create that is actually still available for download by anyone that has access to the internet and found out about the link?
Yeah, that's something to ponder about.
Yeah, so this is the question that we come in, and this is where is a certain control that we should put in. Yeah, whatever tools that you're using, there should be a mechanism to quickly identify these links and make sure that whichever that are still open is valid, and for those that are no longer valid, right, make sure that they are taken down so that in the event that somebody either guessed the link, although very unlikely, or in the event that somebody's email get breached and the link got discovered, and then this is still there, and then somehow that's usually how the story goes. Along with this line will be more towards the idea of permission. So same thing with permissions. We always find it very easy to give permissions. So for personal one, if you are using electronic lock, sometimes or your home Wi-Fi, friends, family come over, give the Wi-Fi password, or sometimes guess convenience, you put in a lot of your thumbprints into whether your home or whether you give your PIN number for somebody to easily access your home. Subsequently, do we keep track of those? And whereby it's no longer valid, do we remove them? Do we have that process and controls in place to then analyze this another process again, right? This is the entire thing about like access management. How robust is that process, and how good is that process to then control such a risk also?
Okay, thank you, Taewei, for clarifying that and explaining in great details. Okay, as for the participants, if you have another questions and didn't get the chance to ask in our Q&A, don't worry, you may still indicate them in our feedback form that you'll be directed to at the end of this webinar, after which the team will review and get back to you with your answers accordingly. Okay, let's move on. Okay, just to highlight to everybody, it's been a while since all of us get to attend physical events or have exhibitions. So InspireTech will be exhibiting in Gulf Fair from the 18th to 20 October this year. And if you would like to learn more and have discussions about our products and services, feel free to register as Gulf Fair visitor and visit us at booth E22, as shown on the screen here. So if you want to register as a Gulf Fair visitor, just take note that it's free of charge. So you may log on to Gulf Fair website to register and do that. Okay. And if you have yet to follow us on our LinkedIn page and Facebook page, do follow us and be informed of our latest updates and events. Yeah, and on that note, I would like to reiterate that if you have any further questions or wish to have further discussions regarding this webinar or any other matters, you may indicate your interest in the feedback form that will be prompted at the end of this webinar. And just to let you know, all feedbacks will be greatly appreciated. Yeah, okay. Taewei, do you have anything to add on?
No, I think yep, that's it.
Right. Thank you everyone for attending this webinar. With that, we have finally come to the end of this webinar. We appreciate all your time. Goodbye, and we hope to see you again.